You know, they look fantastic behind me now. And now when I look out the window, it's like, now to fill them with veg and other delicious edibles. But I'll be honest, putting in these raised beds, coming up with what I was going to do, it was a struggle on a couple of different levels, and I'll get to both of those. So in this video, what I'm going to show you is the whys of raised beds, how I built them, and also some of the challenges that I came across and that you might as well. The garden has 4 new raised beds, all side by side. They're 4 by 8 feet approximately in size, about a foot tall, made of really good sturdy wood that's gonna last a long time. And the idea for these is to grow herbs, greens, and other edibles here at home that will be a lot more easy for me to pick on the go. One of the first questions that I think you'll ask is, why raised beds and not no-dig beds? Many of you will know that my allotment garden is now no-dig, so why not carry that across to the home garden? And I'll be honest, that was my original intention, but there were 2 main obstacles to me doing no-dig beds here. First of all, I'm on a slope, and that slope means that I will have to deal with some erosion. And I know it's not a big deal if you have a large market garden or a larger garden that isn't by the house, but we have lawn here along the front, and we want to use that to lie in the summer. So I don't really want my beds shifting down and into this area down here. The second obstacle is that there is quite a thick hedge on this side of the garden, and then on the other side there's trees and other shrubs, and all of those plants have roots that are going into the soil, and I've come across them already in the lawn. So I have all kinds of roots that would penetrate a no-dig bed, and it could actually just overwhelm my plants. So in the end, I went for a raised bed solution. I also quite like the look of them. I like the orderliness and how they contain the soil, and so that kind of made my mind up. The first big challenge for me was choosing the wood for these raised beds. You know that I'm a big fan of pallets, but pallets and pallet wood, they just don't last very long. So they'll last a few years, 5 years at best, basically. And also, if you're thinking about using pallets, make sure to always use pallets that are stamped HT on the side. So it'll often say HTDB. HT means heat treated, DB means debarked. Avoid any that say MB, because that means methyl bromide, which is an insecticide that they basically pressure treat on the wood to basically stop burrowing insects from crossing borders. The best kind of wood for raised garden beds is hardwood, basically. Rot-resistant cedar and other hardwoods that you don't have to put a preservative on. You can use logs and untreated softwood like pine. It's eco-friendly, but they're not rot-resistant, so they won't last a long time. The most common wood for sale that you find in lumber yards is pressure-treated wood. And in the past, pressure-treated wood, especially in the US and Europe, was treated with arsenic. But you'll find that this is no longer the case. After some consideration, I chose pressure-treated wood myself. And I did my research. Mine has been treated with a compound accepted by the Organic Association, the Soil Association, for use in organic vegetable beds. The wood that I'm using is spruce, first of all. I rang up the actual sawmill as well in the UK, so it's spruce. And it is treated with a product made by the company Lonza, and it's called Tantalith E. And it's free of chromium, it's free of arsenic, and it's also suitable for soil contact, for earth retaining structures, and as I said before, also for vegetable beds. The overall term for pressure treated wood is tannalized wood, and oftentimes Tanalith, that brand name, is associated with it, but not in every case. In different countries, you'll have different products and different companies, different formulations, so do your research. The next dilemma that I had was filling my raised beds. You've heard me talk about the New Zealand flatworm a couple of times, but I want to explain more fully what it actually is and how it affects my garden. My allotment garden has practically no earthworms, and that's because on the Isle of Man we have an invasive foreign species called the New Zealand flatworm that hails from, you guessed it, New Zealand. And it's brought in by plant pots. It will sometimes be stuck to the bottom. It'll sometimes be in the compost or soil. And thanks to that pest, certain parts of the island no longer have earthworms, but they do have those flatworms lying in wait because their eggs will last years in dormancy, and then they will emerge again when the earthworm populations have sprung back. So you can see my dilemma in getting topsoil. My garden here has loads of worms. When filling raised beds, the general advice is to fill them with 40% topsoil, 40% compost, and 20% anything that adds drainage or aerates the soil. I haven't followed that rule, but it will be just fine. So right now it is partially composted horse manure. That's gonna settle, but I wanna talk about that. This stuff is not great to plant in immediately. I use it as mulch, and I've used this exact same stuff on my allotment for years. It will start to break down, and this will form the underlayer of my beds. And over here, I've actually pressed down the compost a little bit just to show you what it will go down to. So right now, you can see it's pretty close to the top. It will actually sink down to about that as time goes on. I'm going to be filling the tops of these with a mixture of topsoil and properly composted compost. But as far as this stuff is concerned, if you're going to be using horse manure or cow manure or any kind of manure, if it isn't 100% composted, this stuff will still have weed seeds in it, so you do have to be aware. And if it does have any kind of a smell to it, like an ammonia smell, it can burn the roots of plants. This bed here on the patio is basically how the raised beds up top will look when they're finished. So what I've done here is I've moved the compost and topsoil that I'd put in before aside, filled them with manure, and then put the topsoil and compost on top. And it's a pretty good depth, you can see. Let's see if we can dig down to the manure so you can start to see it there. So eventually that's what the beds up top will look like. I mentioned tree roots before, and it's still going to be a challenge, I imagine. And the only thing that I could really think of doing at this point is putting down some landscaping fabric at the bottoms of my raised beds. I don't really know if it'll work long term, but if it does become a problem, especially with this bed here that's really close to this hedge here on the side, then I'm going to have to dig down maybe a couple of feet and put in a barrier along the side of the raised bed just to keep the roots out. I don't want the roots going into the beds and basically taking over. That would defeat the purpose of having a raised bed for growing vegetables in. So that you can tell that there's been a lot of thought going into these raised beds, and to be honest, you know, there might be something that I might change or alter in the future, but for now, this has been the best solution for me. And I hope that if you're also thinking about building some raised beds, that it will help you to make some decisions for yourself. There's a lot to think of. There's the financial cost, There is the environmental cost. There's also situation where you're going to plant or put your raised beds. If you have the choice of them being away from a hedge like this, do it. But if you are actually in the same circumstance, I'd be interested to hear how you've dealt with it or how you're thinking about dealing with it as well. So leave that down as a comment below. If you're interested in further information on how I built these beds with the help of Josh and how I filled them, etc., I'm going to put that over on my website as well. So the measurements and more specific things. So if you're thinking about building raised beds, you'd like something similar, that should help you get on your way. And I'll leave a link for that down in the video description. I hope you found this informative. If you've got any questions or comments for me, again, leave them down below. I'd love to hear from you. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye for now.